Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. I am your host, Steve.
I'm someone else.
That's
not
someone
Steve.
else. So we're doing the outro, and we'll do the intro at the end of the video.
That makes sense. Perfect sense.
It's the Patreon Q&A.
Yeah. Patreon members don't care.
Nah,
So whatever.
they know what to expect from us. So part 3, we have some great questions here from our Patreon members. If you want to become a Patreon member, links in the video description. You can ask us any kind of question, and we'll at least answer it on a live stream or here. So,
Yep.
get in and do it. Come on, Tim, go.
Let's go.
Today's video is sponsored by ASRock and their brand new X299 Creator motherboard designed to support Intel's latest generation of Core X processors. You'll have no trouble getting the most out of the Core i9-10980XE on this board. And as the name suggests, the X299 Creator is also designed for content creators, and that means it packs Thunderbolt 3 technology, 10 gigabit Ethernet, and loads of USB Gen 3 ports. So for more information, please check the link in the video description.
In your opinion, which was worse out of these two things starting in alphabetical company name order? So this person's put two things.
Okay.
The first one is AMD's launch of the 5600 XT with BIOS shenanigans, hurting AIB partners with last-minute radical alterations to performance and causing confusion to consumers with buying a base model for, $10 more can give you that 8 to 11% uplift. The second option, Nvidia with RTX with higher prices and features like ray tracing that couldn't be tested and benchmarked in an actual gameplay experience until 2 months after launch for the first game release with ray tracing Battlefield 5. Since then, there have been some RTX games, but nowhere near as many releases as we were led to believe, and overall they charged more and delivered less. So which of those two things is worse?
They're two very different things though. Like 5600 XT thing's much more fresh in my mind, but it's, while annoying and disappointing the way they did it, I think overall it's far less of a disappointment than the entire RTX series. Like I think getting the 2080 Ti being $1,000+ part, that was disappointing. Not being able to get DLSS working for how long?
17 months.
That was disappointing. Ray tracing being pretty much a flop to this point, disappointing. So I think there's more things to be disappointed about. The 5600 XT, which is one GPU in the series, like the 5700 series minus some driver hiccups, have been pretty awesome. I mean, they've been good for me. So from my personal experience, the 5700 series has been awesome. And the 5600 XT, pretty ridiculously bad launch, but it's not something that part shouldn't be able to recover from. The 5500 XT kind of sucks with the PCI Express thing. But I think you would have to say the Nvidia RTX overpromised, underdelivered, and all the other problems that happen with it is more disappointing.
Yeah, I definitely think, even not necessarily like the RTX features, which are kind of
Just the whole thing.
I wasn't that impressed sort of at the launch. I thought, this is probably going to be another one of those things that's going to take a while to...
Yeah, we were like, give us Pascal back. We want our cheap Pascal graphics cards.
The bigger issue with the RTX stuff was definitely the pricing.
Yeah.
And not offering any real price to performance advantage across all of the products.
Because it was coming for so long and there was all the rumors and all the lead up, I don't know if that attributed to Pascal being so cheap, but like there was GTX 1080s, 1080 Ti's, even the 1070 Ti, they were selling so cheap. And everyone was just, people were hesitant to snap them up because they knew the RTX stuff was coming and it was expected to be so much more powerful. And I think when it did come, everyone was like, can we go back in time and get our cheap Pascal cards again? So that was disappointing. You don't really want that after a new exciting series launches.
Yep, that's right. All right, next question. How do you think having one company making mobile GPUs and CPUs for laptops is going to turn out, especially with exclusive tech like SmartShift being developed? So SmartShift is the feature for upcoming Ryzen 4000 processors, where if you have one of those processors and like an AMD GPU, you can sort of meddle around with the TDPs to give you the most efficient performance based on your cooler design. Are Nvidia slowly going to disappear from the low-end laptop market considering AMD's cheaper prices? Well, you'd think that if you could make both major components in a system,
you have an advantage,
there would be an advantage at some point. I think they're definitely not there at the moment in terms of sort of, they're really struggling a bit on the efficiency with sort of your Ryzen 3000 parts compared to Intel, and then in terms of like the Navi GPUs and previous generations compared to Nvidia.
Yeah, so they're not, again, I don't do a whole lot of laptop stuff. I leave that up to the experts, but they haven't they haven't clearly won on any front. So they don't have the most efficient, most powerful laptop CPUs, and they don't have the most powerful, efficient laptop GPUs, discrete GPUs anyway. So basically, Intel's beating them on the CPU front, Nvidia's beating them on the GPU front. You add those two together, and that's your best combo. So although AMD technically should have an advantage of making both, they have to be winning on one of those fronts.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we should see a lot of that discussion change with the move to 7nm CPUs. So they should have, again, we'll have to wait and see how the performance goes with those sort of parts, but they should have at least the chance to be ahead of Intel on that front.
Yep.
And then it's just a matter of cleaning up the GPU side and making that really compelling. So I think, at least in the lower end market, I think the advantages of sort of having the integrated package with not necessarily having a discrete AMD GPU, but certainly the integrated APU sort of style graphics is going to eliminate the need for sort of your MX series GPUs, which is sort of your GT 1030, GTX 1650 class performance. Maybe not quite GTX 1650 class, but sort of your very low end stuff shouldn't really need those Nvidia parts anymore. But beyond that point and sort of your higher end stuff, I think for this generation, we won't see AMD have the all-round solution that's the best. And I still think it could be sort of Ryzen 4000 plus Nvidia GPU that gives you the best experience for now.
I think the stars are slowly starting to align for AMD where they could potentially become dominant in that market.
They should be really nailing the CPU side in this generation, and then how long it takes on the GPU side to get, whether that's the technology to integrate into their APUs or just standalone stuff. That could take a few more generations, but they certainly have the capability and the tools to really deliver something compelling.
Your DLSS revisit video raises some new questions. If Nvidia claims that their new DLSS implementation instead relies on generalized training instead of per game training, and this has removed the quality restrictions, then why is it not a toggle at the driver level instead of having to be specifically developed for and located within the game settings?
So I asked Nvidia this because this was also one of my first thoughts, was like, well, if they've generalized all these aspects, why can't it just be a driver level feature? And basically their answer was part of the SDK still relies on hooks within the game engine. They didn't really elaborate any further on that as to what specific hooks are required, so what data they're taking out of the game to then be put into the algorithm for DLSS. But it sounds like there is some component of the game engine that it needs to run whatever processing thing is, which a driver isn't going to be able to access, particularly for DirectX 12 games, which sort of cuts out even more of the sort of you know, game access that the driver has. Whether or not this is possible for a future generation, though, is up in the air. And I think that it could be possible to integrate a DLSS-like feature lower into the hardware. I'm not quite sure. Again, I'm not an architect of GPUs, or I wouldn't know how this is possible. I don't think it's possible with these generations to have your driver level toggle, but I wouldn't surprise me if this is something Nvidia is working towards as sort of that all-round driver level feature. Like it intercepts it much lower, it sends it off to DLSS and gives you back equivalent image quality at a much, much higher frame rate. So it's something to look out for, but apparently according to Nvidia, that isn't possible right now. What do you think the extra 50 is at the end of the rumoured RX 5950 and 5850 cards? I've heard theories that these big Navi cards could use HBM2 and GDDR6. What's your take? So again, no idea whether those product names are right. Who knows? Let's not talk about that stuff. The interesting part is, will big Navi use HBM2 and GDDR6? I assume they mean both at the same time with this question, because you can only choose one or the other normally.
Yeah, that would be weird.
Are they still using like an HBM2 really quick, like maybe
Cache
1 or 2 gigabytes of HBM2 and then supplement that with 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 or something?
I don't see how, because that would make the memory controller very complex.
Yeah, that's what I'd be thinking.
But
I mean, it's possible, but I think it's unlikely they'd go with that design.
Yeah, but it comes under the rumor speculation thing, which we don't really do, so we're not the right people to ask about this stuff. We don't put a lot of time in and effort into researching things. That we just wait till it's official. We're lazy. We wait for official information and then we test it for ourselves.
Yep. Given Intel struggles with clock speeds on 10 nanometer and the jump to 7 nanometer likely in 2021 or 2022, do you think it is too little too late? My guess is 2021 AMD will move to TSMC 5 nanometer, which should theoretically be comparable. I'm wondering if Intel's class-leading performance is possibly gone for now, and that it'll be a while before Intel leads again. I wonder what your take is on this. I expect that Intel's class-leading performance is gone. I think that they're back to the pack now.
Yeah. They've obviously... Well, I was going to say they've obviously got a really good architecture and design, but for high core counts, I'm not sure that's true. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not like they're out of it and can't come back. They can come back extremely quickly and extremely strong. Whether that will happen, though, remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think they're not dead. Like, they're not completely out of it with no hope for the future, but they're definitely... I mean, they led for years, like a decade of leading, and I think they're just back to the pack now. They're just a company that's competing with AMD, and we might see generations where one company trades blows with the others. One might be ahead 1 year and might fall back the other year, or even depending on the release cycles, it might make more sense to buy one product or another. But class leading, don't think that's happening.
No.
So GG Rambler in our Discord chat posted a fairly long question. So I'm just going to cut out.
Rambler.
I'll just cut out the start and we'll skip straight to the actual question. Do all G-Sync monitors use the same exact G-Sync module? If I went with Asus, Acer, or a different LG, would it be the same module? Never mind the panel or other features those may differ in. So, as far as I'm aware, there are 3 different versions of the G-Sync module. There's a version 1, that's the very original one that was used for quite some time, and that's just been used across all G-Sync monitors, provides your standard DisplayPort, HDMI port, basic stuff. More recently, there's a version 2 of that module, which introduces FreeSync capabilities. Not that they say FreeSync, they just say adaptive sync. But that allows your AMD GPUs and other GPUs to plug in to the G-Sync module and still get your adaptive sync experience. So that's the very latest panels from 2019 onwards should be using version 2. And there's a third module, which is the G-Sync HDR module, G-Sync Ultimate, whatever you want to call it, that's used for those very top-end $1,000, $2,000 HDR monitors that has a few extra HDR capabilities. So depending on the monitor you get, you're going to get one of those 3. There's probably other revisions, like minor revisions between the 2, considering that original G-Sync module has been on the market since, at a guess, like 2015 or earlier. So it's quite likely over 5 years that they would have changed it in some ways. But generally speaking, whether you buy Asus, Acer, LG, it's the same hardware. Will 2nd gen, I think they mean actually 3rd gen here, Ryzen 3 3000 ever happen? Or is Zen 2 reserved for Ryzen 5, 7 and 9 because of the chiplet having 8 cores and producing like a quad-core CPU out of an octa-core chiplet wouldn't be worth it? So basically, will Ryzen 3000 have a Ryzen 3 part using Zen 2? Is that something that you think is going to happen?
This late in the game, I don't really know. I don't know. We haven't really heard much information. I think they're just leaving it. I think we're seeing a similar situation that we're looking at with 3rd and 2nd gen Threadripper. We're just seeing some 2nd gen parts sell alongside 3rd gen mainstream parts.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Ryzen 3 APUs,
which are Zen Plus.
Yeah, so they still count, I guess, as Ryzen 3000, but I would think that the Zen, if there is a Zen 2 quad core coming, that it will be a Ryzen 4000 APU. So it'll be like a 3rd gen Ryzen part. It'll be Ryzen 4000 because they want to confuse us all with the names.
I think it's fair enough, though. I as much as we objected originally and found it confusing, I think it actually makes sense to do this because of reasons we talked about last time, and we thought that maybe this is something Intel would do going forward, and even Nvidia with lower end parts using older manufacturing processes and things like that. So yeah, I don't think we'll see any 3rd gen Ryzen parts like that just yet. Maybe, as Tim said, for the 4000 series.
Yep.
So anyway, because we're getting pretty late in the game as it is.
Yeah, that's right. Do you think next gen systems coming with fast NVMe SSDs will have a positive impact on PC gaming? Currently, there is little to no difference between SATA and NVMe and so on when it comes to gaming. Will future games see more of a benefit with NVMe drives? And conversely, could this potentially impact SATA SSD users in the future? Not just in the sense that they want to wait a few more seconds, but perhaps stuttering due to data streaming, not being fast enough for complex open world games. I think this will happen.
Eventually, yeah.
I think if they do move to true PCIe SSDs and we start seeing, maybe not in the first couple of waves of games, but they will find a way to harness 1,000 plus megabytes per second transfer speeds.
Well, yeah, you just won't have load screens and things in games. It would just be
exactly. So that would, if you're running a game off a hard drive or a slow SATA SSD, there's a possible situation where if they're removing all these load screens and all this loading has to be done within like a few seconds, that you will see stuttering on these sort of SATA drives. And some games have sort of moved towards fewer and fewer loading screens, but still being able to keep up with hard drives.
Yep.
But I certainly think because these next-gen systems are moving that way, and because we know that pretty much everything is dictated by consoles.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it really won't happen until it's a mainstream thing.
That's right.
Because otherwise everyone will have a crap experience. So, as you see, it'll happen, just how far into the future that is hard to say. Could there theoretically ever be a PCI Express card that adds hardware ray tracing to GPUs that currently do not support ray tracing, i.e. all AMD cards and GTX cards?
I think it would be possible. And I think there was one prototype board from not one of the major companies. I think it might have been Imagination or one of those brands that had for a little while like a ray tracing accelerator type card. I'll have to, if I find what that card was called, I'll put up some B-roll of it.
Yep.
But the issue with having a PCIe add-in card for ray tracing is you need to duplicate a fair amount of the hardware that would already be on the GPU. Like you quite likely need its own frame buffer, whereas it could just share that if it was on the GPU.
Gets to the point where it's so expensive that you're better off just selling your graphics card and buying a new one that supports the technology you want.
Yeah, I think that would be the case. It would be not a cheap or like nice solution. And I think we'll just see that RTX stuff or ray tracing just push through with the next gen.
Yep.
Often when a cooler uses direct contact heat pipes, it's touted as a feature. However, do you think it's actually just a cost-saving measure, as a copper baseplate could allow for heat to be more evenly distributed to all the heat pipes? It's a good question.
It's a good question. I'm not sure on the spot we're equipped to answer it or do this one justice. I'd say it's a bit of everything. It depends on the quality and all that, but could be a bit of a cost-saving feature. Obviously, you're using less materials because you don't have a big copper slug that the heat pipes are then embedded in, so you are saving on materials. But then probably sanding the pipes down so they're flat without damaging them or making the walls on them too thin is probably a little bit technical and tricky to do as well. But yeah, I'd say it is probably a more cost-effective way of doing it, but I think it is also a feature. It is a different design. It is a different way about, ultimately you want to be transferring the heat into those pipes so then they can then move it efficiently through the fin array. So it is a different design method and is a feature.
I think that there's, again, not an expert in sort of cooling designs, but there would be two issues that I would immediately think of when using that sort of copper base plate design. The first one is sort of whenever you add steps in the heat transfer process, there's potentials for losses throughout all those processes. So obviously, if you have direct die contact or direct contact, you're going straight from the CPU to the heat pipes to the fins. And then if you're basically adding in a fourth step to that, from the CPU to the slug to the heat pipes to the fins, potentially there's loss there. The other thing I'd worry about is sort of that copper element getting really hot and sort of staying hot and sort of becoming just a bit of a heat sink around that component. Because
do you mean with the copper base plate?
It depends how big it would be, obviously, but I'd be thinking how able is it to directly transfer heat into the sort of heat pipes.
Well, again, that depends on whether it's soldered, how they've done it all.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's so many variables there. The main advantage of the copper base is that it's easy to machine flat and you get 100% contact. So you put a bit of thermal paste on and you should be good to go. With the direct touch heat pipe design, again, it depends. Is there 3 heat pipes? Is there 4? Is there 5? Obviously, the more, the better, because then you have more of a copper base. I've seen ones with 3, they have quite big gaps between them, which you need to fill with thermal paste. And it's like, how efficient is that? That is probably just, that's a cost-saving method.
Yep.
But if it's 5 and it becomes just a base plate of copper pipes and there's only a very small grooves between them, then that's probably going to work very well.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, Tim, do you think Intel will release a Tiger Lake H series for laptops? Are Intel's higher TDP processors doomed to be 14 nanometer forever?
Definitely not forever. There's going to be a point where they move beyond 14 nanometer. Whether,
Tim's wildly speculating now.
who knows what year that will be? I think that's the key question that everyone wants to know is what year will they move beyond? But come on, there's going to be some point where 14 nanometer dies. It's just a matter of when.
I don't think anyone's buying it.
Maybe. Will they release Tiger Lake H series? Who knows? I mean, possibly. It's too hard to say at this point. That's probably more than a year off. We haven't even got 10th gen H series, or desktop 10th gen yet, so too hard to say on that one.
All right. Deep Fried asks, with the advancement of display technology, where do you guys see the market trending towards in the future? Will manufacturers simply increase resolution, or will they eventually stagnate at a good enough resolution and instead see improvements in other areas like color accuracy? Well, Tim, tell us.
I was guessing you might say that. I think we're already at a good point for color accuracy. I think if manufacturers want to make color accurate panels, they can. So I think that's pretty much solved. I mean, wide gamut's a different situation, but accuracy is definitely something that's doable. Where I see the market going, I mean, you sort of look at a display and they've come a long way, but there's still a long way for monitors to go, whether that's taking stuff that is expensive now, making it cheaper. We've seen that happen with sort of 1080p 144 hertz is as cheap as $150 these days, or 1440p 144 hertz down at like $250, $300. That's something that wasn't the case a few years ago, and theoretically you could see the trend continuing to make those displays even cheaper over time. So certainly, that's a way I see the market trending. Stuff gets cheaper, makes sense. As for sort of what happens at the high end with like the best stuff, there's a huge market for HDR.
Yep.
To actually do that properly for cheap. At the moment, it's ridiculously expensive and barely anything does it right. So I think that's a really key way. And obviously, you're just going to get general things. Response times are going to come down over time. Refresh rates are going to increase over time. New technologies are going to come out that makes that stuff easier.
Yeah, that's right.
And cheaper. So there's certainly a lot of stuff that can be done. I think we're definitely not at the point where it's like good enough diminishing return stuff yet. I think there's a lot of ways to go in each of those areas to really, make new stuff and make exciting stuff.
Many, many more years of monitor reviews from Tim, no doubt.
That's right. Okay. Reg Maxwell says, I read an article on workstation GPUs versus gaming GPUs for professional applications. It said workstation GPUs are 5 to 10 times faster for pro applications. This person says, talk about misleading. It's very workload dependent. Have you ever come across a workload in your content creation that performs better on comparable workstation GPUs? One benchmark shows the W5700 outperforming the 5700 XT by a factor of 5 on a Siemens product. What factor do you think is going to impact that, given it's the same silicon and even the same VRAM? I mean, we haven't benchmarked a lot of workstation GPUs, but I'd be very surprised at the claim that it's 5 to 10 times faster if it's the same actual GPU.
Yep. We've talked about this stuff before, I swear, quite recently on Q&As, and from memory the summary was something like it's just better driver support for those applications that game drivers typically don't support.
Better validation, ensuring that your application works with that, and ensuring that the software updates are going to be updated for all those sorts of things. So maybe some of those are going to give a small performance benefit over your gaming driver and gaming GPU because it's more optimized.
Yeah. So
if you're not talking about 5 to 10 times.
Well, if it's completely broken and doesn't work, then maybe it's 5 to 10 times, but it is misleading.
Yeah, it's misleading
if this doesn't work with the gaming driver, but then we make it work. So the hardware is not 5 to 10 times faster. The driver supporting the hardware is. That's what I imagine. We haven't tested it, but that does sound like it's probably very misleading.
Yeah, I mean, one way it could be faster is, for example, you buy a workstation card that has like 24 gig of VRAM on it, and then that is maybe getting bottlenecked on your lower VRAM card. But if you're talking about exactly the same GPU that's just got different drivers, then it's going to be a situation where one is broken and the other one is working.
Yep.
Nick asks, there are some companies like Asus, Corsair, Gigabyte, and MSI that seem to be edging closer and closer to making every component except the CPU for a DIY PC. Do you think that we'll see a company bragging at Computex this year that they make every component except the CPU in a PC? It's getting that way.
What component does Corsair not make in like their...
Well, they don't make motherboards or graphics cards, for example.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
So I think a company like maybe Asus or Gigabyte's the closest. Gigabyte they have memory and SSDs now. they obviously have motherboards, GPUs, they have monitors.
I think they have
They have
everything.
peripherals.
I think they have everything, but it's whether they
They
use
have power
them all.
supplies.
They have power supplies.
Do they do cooling yet?
Who? Gigabyte?
Gigabyte.
Yeah.
So they're probably the closest.
They've got all-in-one liquid coolers and air coolers.
Yeah, so I'd say they're probably the closest at the moment because I think Asus is missing maybe SSDs in there, MSI perhaps as well. A few of those things. They don't make memory yet. So, yeah, I'm not sure whether they'll brag about it, but they're definitely at this point where you got your all-in-one solution. Whether or not they're the best company to actually get all those components from is another question.
Probably not.
Probably not, but yeah.
Looking at today's AMD driver video, do you guys think that buying ATI was a mistake for AMD? Oh, no, definitely not.
No way.
No.
I think that was a good choice by them.
Yeah.
That company probably would have died if it wasn't bought out.
I think we're going to see some pretty good stuff in the future, and there's been some good advancements and stuff. I know we're often down on AMD for their Radeon division, but yeah, I don't think it's quite that bad.
They had a good... There was a period with like HD 7000 series, the RX 200 stuff. That was like R9 200.
Yeah, that was some refreshes and there were some bigger dies. But yeah, they were competitive, that's for sure.
Yeah, there was a period with ATI under AMD that was good. And I think they've slipped away a bit, primarily because of how good Pascal was and Maxwell, and now Turing is sort of... Nvidia was able to make big leaps and AMD sort of hasn't been able to catch up. But yeah, it's good stuff in the future, I think.
Okay. Steve and Tim, you always find out what is the best combination of PC components to have a balanced system and no bottlenecks. If you were to review your workflow, what would you say is the bottleneck? So with our own personal PCs. Few things, but I would say for us, the biggest bottleneck would be the software.
Yes.
It's gotten better for sure.
Yep.
But it doesn't fully utilize 24, 34 core processors. We're talking about Adobe Premiere. And then other bottlenecks, probably just latency related stuff, maybe.
Yeah, I find it's, as you say, kind of we could increase like CPU or GPU performance, but again, Premiere isn't going to utilize that very well. And yes, people will tell us, hey, just use DaVinci, but it's like, has some features, as we mentioned many times before when asked about DaVinci, doesn't have some features that we use. For my workflow, it'd probably be like really just dumb stuff. Like, I'd love to have a case that could hold like 20 hard drives. That'd be, and a motherboard that had like 20 SATA ports on it. Like, that would be great, because then I could just have tons of storage in there for my projects. No need to run these NASs or anything. Don't need any of that. Like, it's just stuff like that. Like,
you can use 10 gigabit LAN to connect to those things, though, so it doesn't really matter.
But, local's always going to be better.
Yeah.
So,
well, you can get cases that hold lots of storage.
Yeah.
And you can basically build a server that would become your editing rig, is what Tim wants to do. But yeah, I think the software, obviously, if the software fully utilized the CPU, and not just in the encoding process, but even the editing process, if applying effects and warp stabilizers and stuff like that could better utilize the CPU, obviously, that would be the bottleneck there. With impending release of the new Intel range of CPUs and the rumor of it foregoing lacking PCIe 4.0, do you think this will hinder the scalability of the platform, especially with newer titles are starting to break the 8GB VRAM buffer?
I wouldn't say it would be too much of an impact this generation.
Yeah, I think I'll get away with it.
Yeah, haven't seen too many. Like, if you buy an Nvidia GPU right now, none of them have PCIe 4.0, so it's not even going to matter. No,
I guess it's just not ideal. Like, if you're buying a really expensive premium Intel motherboard with their flagship CPU and you don't have PCIe 4.0, whereas AMD users have for a year now.
Yeah.
Not ideal.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but at the same time, a lot of these parts from Intel are sort of
it's more
competitive stopgaps.
Yeah, and I think Nvidia graphics cards not supporting them is not a big deal. I mean, I know they give the 8GB VRAM buffer example here, so when you're accessing system memory, you have twice as much bandwidth. But I think that's really only an issue for lower end cards again, so not a premium product thing we're talking about. It's more for guys who want to put an expansion card in with tons of NVMe SSDs for high-speed storage, I would have thought. So, a niche thing, sure. But if you're building a high-end, expensive system, that's probably something you don't want to miss out on. All right, that'll do it for the final Q&A of this month. We'll do the intro now, or is it?
Yes, that's right. Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed.
But anyway, yeah, the questions were good. Part 1 and 2 was enjoyable. A lot of interesting questions, not too many things where we had to guess or speculate. So there was
Yep.
some interesting things there. I'm looking forward to doing it next month. Before then, though, we'll probably
Yep.
film some other videos, do some other content, got some other things planned, some benchmark videos, some monitor reviews.
Yeah, lots of stuff planned. Not too many releases in the next sort of little bit. We don't expect, so we mostly revisit sort of interesting analysis. Got some builds, bit of NDA stuff that we can't talk about just yet coming up as well. So interesting times. Should be fun. Should be good.
So stay tuned for all that. But as always, thank you for watching this video.
Yep.
I'm again your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.